Hi, our guest today is Michael Walsh, Chairman of the School Committee, who is running for the 2-year seat on the Board of Selectmen, being vacated by Selectman Brian Murray stepping down from that seat. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Got a really hard question for you.
Sure.
Why are you running for Selectman?
I feel that my management style, my leadership style will bring something different to the board. If you look at my track record, my results, how I get things done, I'm very detail orientated. And when I say leadership style, I go back to a term that you hear in Milford, not often as you used to, but the 4 to 3, 2 to 1, 3 to 4, 1 to 2, and you know, you're not always going to vote together,
Right.
but you all got to work together. And that's key. And I'm not saying that they're not working together, but if you look at, and I serve with a lot of great people on the school committee, but if you look at the school committee now, it's 7 people all working, pulling the boat the same direction, trying to do the right thing.
You don't see a lot of split votes anymore.
Exactly. We push for unanimous votes. So, and that's important. That sends the right message to the community. When the message gets to the community, and you know in my 8 years of being on the school committee, there's been some tension,
Yeah.
and I'm not ashamed to talk about it, but the message that gets out to the community is that you as a board are not getting along. And that's not the message you want to have out there. You're not always going to agree on everything.
Right.
But when you walk out of that room at night, the message that gets to the street is you want them to understand that you, as a 7-member board, more importantly, or I shouldn't say as important, as a 3-member Board of Selectmen, that you're all trying the best to pull in the same direction.
Well, it's very important to have that open debate on an issue.
Absolutely.
But it has to be a civilized debate.
Correct.
And then what you have to do is come to consensus and find that place where everybody gives a little, everybody gets a little. And that's probably the most important part.
Right.
Right,
Absolutely.
especially, I think, if you're doing a major appointment, like in your case, the news, when you elevated Dr. McIntyre to be superintendent, you don't want to see a 4 to 3 vote on that because the public says hey, and he says hey.
Right. And that, you know, that's a great example, and whenever I get the opportunity to talk about that, I do. There's an example of where Dr. Tremblay left this district in such great shape, because if you look at the movement that happened in that district at the end of last year, think about it, new superintendent, new assistant superintendent, new director of special education, new director of Shining Star.
New director of technology.
Yeah, new director of technology, opened a $60 million elementary school flawlessly.
It all worked
Right.
out well, right. Right.
You know, and that's a testament to a good leader, and that's what Bob was.
And the interesting part about that is the guy he works for, the people he worked for, is the school committee.
Right.
So, for all intents and purposes, the guidance comes from the school committee.
Right.
So the
Yeah.
one question I've heard people ask is, your term on the school committee isn't up.
Correct.
If you're elected selectman, are you staying on the school committee?
Yes. I committed to 9 years to the town of Milford. When I first ran, I said I'm going to run for 3 terms, and if I get elected for 3 terms, I will finish the term. And my plan is to do that. My plan is not to, because as you know, if I was to decide, A, not to stay, then it becomes the Board of Selectmen and the school committee have to get together, interview a pool of candidates. They've got to pick somebody.
Right.
Okay? I don't want to put the town through that. I only have 1 year to go. I'm going to, you know.
So you're going to serve it out and then...
Right, I'm coming off as chairman. I'm ending my 2nd year as chairman, but I'd like to stay there, you know, having been the longest member, 8 years, I'd like to spend the last year or so, maybe even in an advisory position, you know, to the newer members that are on there. Things that I've been through, you know, and how you handle them.
Well, we used to have an old saying in Boy Scouts, which was you're doing the job for a minimum of 3 years. And it's the first year, the person that's in it is training you. The 2nd year, you do it. And the 3rd year, you're training your successor to do it.
Right.
And then you're out.
When I first, Kevin, when I first got on, I will never forget this. A member walked into the room, my first meeting, and very seasoned, said, could I possibly give you a little advice? And I said, of course you can. And she looked at me and said, close this and open these for 1 year. And I took that advice. Some members don't, but I did.
That's great advice. Now, interestingly enough, that your history or what you're trying to do is the same way I became a selectman. I was on the school committee for 7 years and then moved into the Board of Selectmen for 6 years. My choice was to get off, and the reason why, because I had served 2 terms. So it made sense for me to get off and make that move to take the next step.
Yeah, well, that's interesting because I was asked that it seems like the school committee in Milford is the proving grounds for the Board of Selectmen.
Other towns, it's usually the finance committee. It seems like here it is the school committee. I mean, if you look at the past selectmen, Dino DeBartolomeus, school
of them.
committee to selectmen.
Yeah,
Brian Murray, school committee to selectmen.
Yeah.
Bill Buckley, school committee to selectmen. Will Kincaid, school committee to selectmen.
yeah. And I personally believe the reason for that is when you first get elected to school committee, in most cases, you haven't had any involvement as far as with the departments at Town Hall, Finance Committee,
Right.
Planning Board, Board of Selectmen, Health Department. So, you know, you get on committees, you start to learn, you know, you have to work with these different departments. You're always working with the Finance Committee, as you know, because every year you're putting your budget together, so you learn the inner workings of the Finance Committee, the members on the Finance Committee, and then as you become a more seasoned school committee member, it just becomes, you get more and more and more involved. So the next step would be, or the next transition would be run for the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Well, as a school committee member, you have experience in a large organization.
Right.
And being involved in the nuts and bolts and gears of a large organization. And also, you're managing a budget. So you have to understand that budget. And so it's a short step from a school committee or school budget, which is this big, to a larger budget, which is town.
Right.
And it also gives you the experience to accomplish a task through a committee. And a lot of people do not understand that running a business or whatever and then accomplishing tasks on a committee are 2 different spots.
Well, government itself is different than running a business.
Right.
Yes,
And,
yes.
and, you know, but Mike, as you make the transition, do you have any goals in mind as a selectman?
Not necessarily goals, I have concerns.
What are the concerns?
Concerns I have is, I spoke about it the other night, stormwater management. And I'm gonna go back to, if you remember back in the 70s, when all of a sudden, all the gas stations were dirty, and all that dirt was dug up out of the ground and taken to
Yep.
Tonawanda, New York, for billions of dollars.
Right.
And then somebody got smart and said, why can't we put this dirt on the side of the building, cover it, and flip it every so many days with a backhoe because gasoline evaporates? Well, what about all that money that was spent prior? Nobody ever got that back. I say the same thing. I'm worried that they're going to force the towns of Franklin, Milford, Bellingham to get involved into this stormwater management program. Maybe 10 years down the road, the same thing's going to happen, and someone's going to say, geez, you know what, we could do it this way, but what about all that money that's already been spent?
The rain tax or the roof tax, as people call
Right,
it.
so I have a concern with that, and the other concern I have is I don't like the approach that the EPA takes. You know, to me, they just come in and say, this is the way it's gonna be, and you're gonna accept it. Well, no, that's not the way it has to be, you know, and maybe at the end of the day, you're right, but let's walk slowly, because you're talking about a lot of money that impacts the people in the town of Milford.
What I think is interesting is
You're right.
the EPA originally told the town of Milford, when Mike Santoro was the town engineer, he came up with a figure of about $110 million. And the EPA had some engineers that said, you're crazy. And after 3 years of research, guess what number they came up with?
Yeah,
$110 million.
yeah. And
So it wasn't crazy.
And look at how it affects the employers. Look at my boss. How many roofs does he own?
Oh, that's exactly the
And
case.
parking lot space.
Yeah, and parking lots.
And not only the roof issue, but the parking lot issue, because there's a total destroy and reconstruct.
Right.
I mean, the cost involved.
Well,
in
if
this
you
is
look at the
amazing.
new buildings going in now, you can see, you know, everybody always says, you know, why are they still in the ground level and no steel going up in a building? For months and months and months, they're putting in all those underground chambers to handle this rain issue.
Right.
But what else besides that?
As you know, the school committee is surplus middle school east as of
Right.
June 30th. The reason we picked the date of June 30th is because there are groups that are actively in there right now, still using particularly the gym.
Right.
So we said we didn't want them to have to get out in March, scattered to find
And it
something.
is the end of the fiscal year, so.
Exactly. So we
Right.
said, you know what, we committed to keep it for a year, we'll keep it till June 30th. But now I circle back and say, okay, but does the town have a use for it? You have people in town halls sharing offices. The town of Milford is paying for outside storage. You've got your central office in the high school, which used to be the nurse's station. You got Shining Star in the basement of the high school. What I'm getting at is, could the town come back together and have a use for that building together with the school department? And if not, if we all decide at the end of the day that we don't, then what are we gonna do with it? You know, are we going to knock it down? Are we going to sell it? But that's an area that needs to be properly managed, you know?
Well, to me, the biggest issue with that building is the lack of parking.
Yes. But also, and shame on us, when the long-range educational plan in the Woodland School got approved and it was told that that building was going to be surplus, unfortunately, the absolute least of maintenance was done on the inside.
Right.
So until I got 2 tours inside that building, and I personally said, geez, we really should do something with it, until you walk around it and say, you know, we really as a school district don't have a use for it. The other thing I talk about, and it's coming, it's not coming tomorrow and it's not coming next year, but it's coming down the pike, is a high school. And whether you want to talk about it today or not, it's the next building.
It's been talked about.
Yeah, it's the next building that's got to be looked at. So, you know, those are, you know, concerns to me. I look at the water company, and you know, I'm a private business kind of guy, and I say, I understand we had a little glitch, or you want to say we had a big glitch. $63 million is a lot of money to me. And I know that the plant is physically done, and I know the plant's in good shape, but how about the infrastructure under the roads and some of the streets that could be 60, 70, 80 years old?
Well, you're going to pay for it one way or another.
Well,
You're either
but,
going to pay for it through the rates if they're a private company,
yeah,
or you'll pay for it if the town takes over.
but personally, I would rather have my rates go up a little bit than to have to spend $63 million and have the infrastructure start stepping out, because you know, Kevin, you're smart enough to know, you open that road up, and now you got a water pipe that's 60 years old, you got a gas main that's 60 years old, what's gonna happen? You're gonna end up 109 in Medway, ripping the whole road up and everything underneath being changed.
We went through that. Sometime I'll have a discussion with you about what we went through in Upton with the same issue, because they were all transite pipes,
Right.
old pipes. And so one would break over there, and 2 weeks later they'd break over there,
Okay.
and you get hammered.
Right.
So, because you're on the school committee right now, I know
Yeah.
the selectmen are very, you know, thoroughly briefed on this, and now the finance committee is. So you haven't had the benefit of the top hush briefings yet,
No,
where basically they lay out all the financing plans and everything. You know, my understanding of that is each time they uncover one rock and deal with it, they find another rock they have to deal with it. So, you know, the original plan of let's have a town meeting in March is gone,
yeah, that's right, it got pushed back.
and it'll be whenever.
Yes, yes, and I'm not saying I'm against it. Well, I'm just a concern, that's a
Well,
concern.
You want more information?
You don't know
More
the data
information.
any more than I do.
Right,
I mean, all I know is the premise was, if you pay the same rates today, that could pay for the cost of buying the water company, minus the, you know, because of the savings on their profit, the property taxes they pay, and some other taxes that
Right.
wouldn't have to be paid.
Well, you have to set up an enterprise account.
right, and to me, you know, what I look at is why do I, and I'm not saying, because again, I don't have all the facts, but what I'm looking from the outside, I see, why would I want to take something that's a private company and put it into a municipality? Okay?
The biggest answer I keep getting out of town officials is they want accountability. They have a tough time getting accountability with a private company.
Then that's the responsibility of the Board of Selectmen. If you feel that you're not getting accountability out of that management of that water company, then you need to call them in and keep calling them in and keep calling them in until you get the accountability that
You
you
get the
want,
information.
Right, well, that's
Yeah.
why they looked at buying it,
you know?
to make it accountable by being a town
You don't
department.
have to buy it to make it accountable, you know? I don't get a raise to become more accountable.
Yeah, but you can't fire them, that's the difference.
Yeah.
The difference is, if I'm leasing cars from Imperial, and I don't like the way it's going, my ultimate weapon is I lease the cars from somebody else. You can't go, well, Milford Water Company, we don't like the water we're getting from you and your accountability. We'll go somewhere else.
Right.
Well, there's,
It's a monopoly.
well, there's a way around that. You bring the EPA in.
No, they did that.
Yeah, well, that,
I just don't think you have to buy something to hold somebody accountable. I don't agree
well,
with that.
Well, I agree with you to an
Yeah,
extent. I think
yeah.
there are more reasons that I just think fundamentally there's such a loss of trust in the
Yes.
townspeople
Yes.
as to the
And that's-
management of the company.
and so that's really the issue.
Right.
The real issue is not whether or not the company's being run right or whatever. The real issue is there's a lack of trust.
Trust.
So that may be one area to improve on,
Right.
which can relieve, because 63, that's a lot of money.
Yeah. It's that famous word, transparency.
Yeah, right.
Everybody throws it out there. That's what it means.
So,
Anything else?
No, that's,
okay,
you know,
so
four
you're
biggies.
elected, so you're elected in April 4th.
Yeah.
And not knowing where the 3-year seat is going,
Uh-huh.
you have Will Kincaid entering his 3rd year
Yeah.
of his first term.
Mm-hmm.
You would have you coming in your first year of your first term.
Mm-hmm.
And you could conceivably have somebody else in their first year of their first term.
Mm-hmm.
Does that give you any pause?
Not on my end, because I feel that by that time I'll have 8 solid years of the school committee. Think about it. If I in fact am lucky enough, and I hope I do
Yeah.
get to the Board of Selectmen, I'll be chairman my 2nd year.
Right,
Well, I've been chairman of the school committee for 2 years back to back, unheard of.
right.
You know, so I think that my leadership style in my long-term longevity on the school committee, you know, will definitely give me the experience that I need. To Al's point, it's just a bigger budget, more responsibility.
And my answer to that concern actually is, you're not doing the day-to-day management. You have department heads
Right,
for
that's-
that. You're steering the ship.
That is so important, and I just had this conversation with somebody today I met, and when I first got elected to the school committee, I will never forget this. A teacher walked up to me and said, "Mr. Walsh, can I ask you a question?" And started to ask me a question, and I looked at her and I said, "Do you think I'm going to walk into your classroom and tell you how to teach your class?" She goes, "Well, some members do." I said, "Let me tell you something. I have 3 areas of responsibility: hiring and firing the superintendent, budget, and policy.
That's it.
That's
If
it.
you need something,"
By
I said,
law.
"you need to go to your building principal. Your building principal needs to go to the superintendent. The superintendent comes to me and says, we need to find money to fund this project down at the school.
Right.
But it is not my responsibility to tell you how to teach." It's the same thing for the Board of Selectmen. It's not my job to go sit in Tom O'Loughlin's office and tell him how to run his police department, or Bill Toohey how to run the fire department. My job is to help. My job is to help them, okay? And I'm very clear on that. I know what my area of responsibilities are, and that's where I stay.
A little anecdote story about that very thing. When the first year I was selectman, the first day I went to a lot of department heads and had that same discussion, and I asked one of them, I won't say who, I said, "Do you have a business card?" And they said yes. So they handed me a business card, and I said, "Oh, it says department head on it." And I said, "Oh, that's great. I just want you to understand that if you can't do your job, then we'll have to get somebody else to do your job, because I'm not going to do it."
Right. It's the truth.
Right.
And that's
Yeah.
important.
I don't think people really realize that outside of the, to borrow Teddy Roosevelt's phrase, the bully pulpit and the moral authority.
Right.
And, you know, Al and I are both ex-selectmen.
Yeah.
You know, you got liquor licenses, some one-day permits.
Oh, yeah.
You might hire and fire a direct employee in the town hall. You don't have a lot of other power besides that.
Right.
Negotiate contracts,
Right.
you know, and people don't realize that, and they come in, well, I'd like to do this, and I'd like to do that, and I'm sitting there going, you really don't know the job, but that's another issue.
Right.
But you think your 8 years, we didn't talk about the youth commission experience either, so you've also been the chairman of the youth commission for how many years?
I think it was 2008 I got elected to chairman. I've been on since 2000. When was John Seaver? 2003. So I've been on since 2004. Is when.
So 13 years.
Yeah. What happened? The story there was United Way was going to pull out. There was just
Right.
the youth commission was not doing well, and Paul Minor said, "You know what? Enough." John Seaver at the time was on the Board of Selectmen. Went to his brother Wally, God rest his soul, and said, "Listen, you need to help me. You got to put a board together, because we can't afford to lose the youth center. We can't afford to lose the United Way." So that's how I got on. And in 2008, I got made chairman, which I still have today.
9 years later.
Yeah, 9 years later, and you know, was on the Army Renovation Committee, and look what we got now. You
No,
know?
I think that's the transition there has been tremendous.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, you have a facility over there that's
yeah,
any town would be jealous of.
yeah. 150, 160 kids a day are going. We'll be in later on tonight. You're in that youth center every single day, and you got to get in there. You know, the programs that are in there at night are important. I'm not going to say they're not, but you got to get in there in the after-school program,
Right.
and just witness what's going on there. So we had a Thanksgiving dinner. We served over 200 kids Thanksgiving dinner. Well, while this was all going on, I ran into the volunteers. A former customer of mine that was an engineer, retired, he comes back there now in the afternoon, he tutors math. If you could see him with the round tables and all the kids that he's got in there and he's tutoring math, not only is he helping the children, it's given him a purpose. People that are in there teaching art. You got Amy Leone helping us in there with children that are struggling with things that
Right.
they just can't
Correct.
figure
Yes.
out.
Yep.
You know, you get kids in there getting exercise that they truly need. You know, we got help in there for kids that just need someone to talk to.
Well, it's also a feeding center during the summertime when kids are no longer going to
Right.
school.
Well, what's your reaction though when I hear people say, well, we spent $5 million to renovate it, so they should have 300 kids a day there?
Well,
First of all, my reaction to that is, have you ever been in the youth center? And my second reaction, just give it time. That's the same thing that's being asked to me about the bus route.
Yes.
That's a
Oh,
great,
that's another one.
that's a great question, because I say, if you're looking at that bus coming down the road, like a school bus, and you want it to be full, you're looking at it the wrong way. What you need to look at is the people that are getting to Milford Hospital for care, the people that are getting to the Dana Farmer Center for
Yeah.
care, the people that are getting to Kohl's to do grocery shopping and maybe going to Panera Bread and getting a bite to eat. That's the only way they have to
Well,
get out of their
right
home.
now, you've got just about 7 months of ridership data,
Mm-hmm.
and the town's got to decide whether to renew it. And the question is, I think, should it be renewed? It was treated as a pilot. Should it be
Correct.
given a second year as a pilot to let people know it?
Absolutely.
I still bet you that if I grabbed 10 people at random and asked them about the bus, about 8 of them wouldn't even know it existed.
and they're one short of this last month, one short of 1,000 riders.
Right.
One short.
Oh, they're over that.
No,
Right.
last month there were 999.
But I mean, and
Oh,
to
by
me,
month, yes.
it's the same thing with the youth center. You can't judge it one day by the group that's there. You gotta get involved, and you gotta look at statistics.
But the bean counters are judging them that way.
Well, then
Yeah,
you
but,
gotta
you know,
push back.
You got to look down the road.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely correct.
Yeah, yeah. If you're looking at it that way, you're looking at it very short-sightedly. You know, you know, that youth center in 2 to 3 years, I mean, I say the same thing. I used to go to the Fields Project on Sunday afternoons, and people from Milford would be walking by me with a coach or a parent from another town, and they'd say, oh, there's a school committee member, and they'd bring them over, they introduce them to me, and they would say, look me in the eye, and they would say, you would never get something like us in our community, never. And when we were renovating the Armory, I said the same thing. I said to Brian Murray, I said, Brian, you know what's gonna happen? The people that used to come off the Fields Project and say you'd never get something like this in our town, when they're walking out of here from Biddy basketball and everything else on the weekends, that's exactly what you hear. What a beautiful place.
I think it's also important, you know, when people do that, they forget, you know, that was a $5 million renovation.
Yeah,
Over $4.5 million of that was just bringing the building up to code.
right.
You got very little new things in that building for
That's-
that money.
Yes, and
But-
that's one of the things that we're talking to the Finance Committee about right now, because there's some little things that we're dealing with, like some electrical issues in the basement and things like that, and they were cut. You know, we cut them, and now, like Chris Moore has been great to us. He said, but why didn't somebody come back to us and say, you know, this could be done?
Well, because you were getting nickel and dimed
Yeah, but it's a
front.
budget issue.
Right,
Budget. People
right,
say you
you
got to
know.
be on or below budget.
But in the future, now you know, if the next project, whatever it is, we understand that. But, you know,
I think one of the interesting things about Milford is you sit here, a couple of years ago, there were 2 or 3 buildings getting new roofs. And the Finance Committee said, what kind of warranty are we getting? And all the departments said 20 years. And they said, go back and find out what the warranty increase was for 30 years. And the FinCom came up with the money to get a 30-year warranty, which is very important,
very.
you know, because you don't want to be shelling out $3 million every so often.
Yeah, Yeah, and you know, the interesting thing of dealing with the finance committee, because as you know, I have a lot of experience with it, is it's almost like the teacher negotiations. I've done 3 teacher contracts in my 8 years. You start out a little bit on the rough side.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, everybody wants to do what's best for the taxpayers and the children in this community. And that's how we end up with this beautiful youth center, sports complex, I mean, the senior center, Memorial Hall. I mean, I could go on and on. Woodland Elementary School. I mean, I was in there Saturday for the
That's a
computer training
showpiece.
that they did. That's how you get there, by a group of people all working together that are dedicated.
That's number one. And number two, which is just as important, one of the things this country has overall missed is infrastructure.
Right.
Milford's done a very good job on keeping that infrastructure being improved and
Right.
you know, the things that are important to the community. I think that's great.
I talk about it all the time. The Rob Quinn, the facilities managers for the school, take the time to go meet him. He's a great guy. He'll walk around schools and he'll say, I fixed that, I had to fix that, I had to fix this. All these things that he had to fix that were disconnected, wire tied together or whatever, but he got everything working, and then he got everything on a maintenance program, and every year, things just go along in the school district. You got Carlos, who takes care of the town buildings. I was in the police station today. It's immaculate. It's immaculate. The fire station last week, it's the same thing. You go into Memorial Hall. He helps us at the youth center, okay?
I know.
Because they take pride in what they do, but as to Al's point, the town of Milford stepped up and said, you know what, we can't build these buildings and then do nothing to them for 30 years and expect them to last.
what's
We
funny,
need to
how-
maintain them.
You know, I was in the new Superior Court building they built in Worcester. Well, I guess it's 10 years ago already. And I was in there about 5 years ago. I was in right after they opened it. I was in about 5 years later. The floors are dirty. It's not kept up. And I'm like, this is not right.
No,
This is a $100-something million building.
yes,
And it's just dirty.
right.
And, you know, you come in a town building and they're spotless.
And it doesn't have to be dirty. That's just,
No, that's exactly the case. It's
Yeah.
short money
Right.
to do the right thing. And what happens over the long haul, you save a lot of money by
Right.
doing that.
Well, I have a thing I do all the time. In fact, with the warm spell we just had, you'll usually see me in the spring with a pad of paper and a pen, and I walk around my house. And one of the neighbors said to me one day, you know, I'm looking at the roof, well, look at what are you doing? I said, I'm writing down a list of everything I have to do this summer. You know, this happened over the winter. There's a little gap here. The paint's chipping on that trim. I want to, paint that door trim. I want to do this. I want to do that.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, so you do that every year? I said, every spring I look at it, and it's got to be done by fall.
Yep.
And I said, just, you do $5 and $10 a year on something, it's not $100 down the road.
I give you one better, and this goes back to what we were talking about, holding people accountable. Aldo Chakey told me this story. When he was superintendent of schools in Blackstone,
Stone
Millville,
Millville.
he would go in the morning, and he would literally put on a white glove, and he would just go along, and all the corridor doors that were open, he would just pull them this way and wipe the sill of the window that was there. He would look in the, very simple. You can do it walking around with a cup of coffee.
Right.
And then he said, then I wouldn't reprimand the janitor. No, I wouldn't reprimand him, but I'd say, listen, I'm a little disappointed, and these are the things that I'm seeing. Okay, holding him accountable. And slowly but surely, it gets taken care of because he knows that you're watching.
Well, believe it or not, Mike, we're out of time.
Oh,
So we wish you luck on April 4th. You have
Well, thank you.
any last words to potential
I would
voters
just
for
like
you?
to say to you, please get out on April 4th. I want you to make sure that there's 2 separate elections, that Bill Buckley and John Erickson are running for the 3-year seat. Harold Rhodes, Jessica LeBrecq, and myself are running for the 2-year term, remainder of Brian Murray's seat. I'd appreciate your vote on April 4th. Thank you.